Welcome back, Chiefs Kingdom. This is Locked On Chiefs. We have a great show for you today. Talk turnaround that happened in Washington, who's back on track, who played where, and what it means going forward. We're going to get deep into, is this the turning point of this early season? Thanks for being here. This is Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for making us your first listen today. I hope that you'll find another one on the network, maybe the Locked On NFL Draft Show. That's always a good option. We're brought to you by McDonald's of the Golden Arches. We'll talk to you about them in a little bit, but we have a lot going on as we get more information and we take a look at what happened yesterday. I feel even more optimistic than I did post-game. It's one thing to get a win, but right now, like, there's a number of things that stand out about how they got that and where they're going. This feels like I think it's a turning point for the season. Do you?
I think it certainly could be. I have a hard time giving the thought process of a turning point, considering Washington is not a good football team. But I certainly understand where the thought process is coming from. I think the defense looks a lot better. And we'll talk about in the second segment about that a little bit more. But I do think that this is a building block, at least.
Yeah. Folks, if you are new to us, whether you're on the YouTube channel, which you should like and sub and do the bell thing over there. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics, one of the hosts. Me and Chris have been doing this for over 5 years now. He's Chris Clark, an analyst that really has me beat on the cap every year. So very important about how this team gets built. We end up going through a lot of roster building, cap, etc., because this team doesn't have much space. And I know there's a lot of trade deadline talk out there. I don't think we're going to get into that today because I don't think the Chiefs can do anything. Do you see anything on the horizon for them trade-wise?
I can't see anything being done unless they're going to extend somebody, because right now they just don't have the money. So if they're going to extend Tyrann Mathieu or Tyreek Hill or somebody like that, then you can make a trade. But otherwise, it's probably not going to happen because right now they have nothing. And they've got to bring another person up that's going to take up more money, because Jody Fortson is going to end up on IR, which means they're going to have to bring somebody else up at a different position. And maybe they get used on a guy like Kyle Long, who's already on the roster.
Mm-hmm. That's the eligibility of Kyle Long is one thing. I'm not sure if it's a 1-for-1.
They have a 3-week period to activate him on the PUP list. It starts this week since they've been through 6 games.
Right. I don't know that it's a 1-for-1. I'm not sure how they feel about the depth there with Blake Bell already hurting. The big thing for me is, as I reflected on this, I think I mentioned yesterday, I can't remember if I did or not, that Noah Gray had a pretty substantial block down on the goal line that I really enjoyed, and it was good to see him do something that I don't think is one of his strengths, but seems to be evolving. Is this the point, because Jody's been so overperforming until this injury, is this a point where maybe we see Noah Gray actually start to get some targets and play a bigger role in the offense?
I think it has to be the point. Either that or they're going to have to switch it up to Josh Gordon getting more targets.
Mm-hmm.
But he only played, 12 snaps against the Washington football team, so that's hard to see. But again, I always thought it was going to be 3 or 4 weeks after he signed before he was really going to get acclimated to this offense. So it doesn't shock me that he didn't get used a ton this week. I think that they have packages for him, and he's still getting used to it. So I think that his usage will grow as the season goes on. But it didn't really shock me that he didn't play that much. And Blake Bell being injured does create question marks, because Kansas City likes to have 2 or 3 tight ends on the roster and active during the game every week, and that won't be something that they can do right now with Blake Bell hurt and Jody Fortson going to IR. And don't forget, Travis Kelce is banged up as well, so there's some questions there as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's not anyone left really to convert. And when I look at the snap counts, it was 11 for Gordon. I certainly think they have to get him more. Like you said, that ramp up feels like it's coming. Andy Reid did comment that they had more planned. They didn't get to it. It didn't work out that way. Sometimes once you get in contact, plans kind of go out the window. I certainly
situational football changes things.
Absolutely. But Gray did put in, 46% of the snaps Gray was on the field. That's a pretty good uptick as well. And I'm hoping that means that he's ready to step up there. And I think if they need to backfill to the practice squad or something like that, if it is Long that comes up or whatever it is, I know Jerice Fountain is still out there. He has not signed elsewhere. And he had some nice words on social media and stuff. Like, I think that's, again, a guy that I might think about bringing back that you can get some reps out of.
Yeah, it's possible. And the one thing I would say about Gray is I don't think he was slated for as much of a role in that game as he ended up getting, because I think they were expecting Fortson to do a lot more things. later in the game, and obviously he wasn't available. So you go with what you have. And at that point, I think that when you start looking at the tight end group, you are going to have to try to find another answer. And one of the guys that everybody talked about Kansas City trying to find a way to get was Zach Ertz when he got traded to the Arizona Cardinals this past week. And he really wouldn't have fit cap-wise anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been a really interesting duo. Again, putting the younger guys on kind of pause for their development. But yeah, certainly without having the money to use, that's clearly out the door. I wonder if there isn't some acquisition in the future too, depending on the length of this injury for Jody Fortson. There are a number of free agent guys that I think are going to be middle tier cost wise. And I think the Chiefs have some cap cleaning up to do this offseason. We'll see how much room that they have.
They have a ton of cap room to figure out this offseason. And I think that's going to be probably one of the keys that they're going to be looking at going into this offseason. But let us tell you about one of our new friends. Ryan kind of mentioned this earlier. This episode of Locked On Chiefs is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get a tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family come to reconnect. A place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing they'll have a dependable Wi-Fi, endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. Win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team, or the away team can come to recharge. It's a place you always look forward to stopping at on a long road trip to rest your legs and refuel. Whether it's Little League games, birthday parties, or grabbing McDonald's after a busy day, or when you're late to something and need something delicious and dependable, you need to go to McDonald's. Head over to your local McDonald's to refuel and reconnect. Did somebody say Locked On Chiefs watch party at McDonald's? Could see that happening, although, we'll have to see if we can get that going in Kansas City. I'm loving it. This episode of Locked On Chiefs is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. Can't say enough about McDonald's. I think it's a fantastic place. And one thing I will say, we didn't get a Big Mac sack yesterday. That's the one thing that really sticks out in my mind when you start talking about the defense. They didn't get a sack, so there is no Big Mac deal at McDonald's in Kansas City.
Yeah, you're right. And unfortunately, the lack of completion on the pass rush was glaring to me. Like, again, we mentioned yesterday that I felt like they collapsed the pocket pretty well in terms of a 4-man, especially. So it wasn't as lopsided, didn't leave escape routes as much. And Heineke can take advantage of some of them. But I think in the end, pressure came in places that I think that we've been sorely lacking. The two guys that got the most pressures yesterday were Jaron Reed and Frank Clark, guys that you need to be the ones getting pressure. Now, Tershawn Wharton come up and added as well, and even so did Derek Nottie, and Tyrann Mathieu was sent on a couple of blitzes as well. But for the first time in a couple of games, it wasn't Mike Dana being the only guy getting pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, and Frank Clark should have had a sack. And I do think that it was pointed out yesterday during the game, he should have had a sack. He didn't get Heineke to the ground. And the question is what do you do to get that fixed going forward? Because you absolutely need to have a situation where he gets to the ground, and that's a sack. But obviously he missed it in that specific instance.
Yeah, and it's one thing to get the pressure. Finishing is another deal. And unfortunately, it takes some getting used to. Now, I do want to ask you, I felt that Frank looked better than he did a week ago. And looks like maybe he's starting to get his legs back. Did you get the same impression, or am I dreaming happy thoughts here?
No, I thought he looked better. And he played, 80% of the snaps almost?
Yeah, I think he was 5th on the defense, 81%, 48 snaps.
Yeah, that's impressive for a defensive for a defensive end. And I did have somebody point out on YouTube, and I will admit I didn't get a chance to go back and look at it. It sounds like Wharton was actually a DT when he got the interception, and it was a stun or a twist that caused him to look like he was the D end. Regardless of that, I just want to throw that out there because somebody else pointed it out. But regardless of that, I think Frank Clark did look very good, at least at times. But against that against that offensive line, he should have looked better. And I still don't think he's back from his hamstring injuries. I'm curious whether we will see Frank Clark get healthy this season if he continues to play.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's see. By my count, it looks like Turk had 11 snaps of his 32 that were at end. So roughly a third.
Okay.
Yeah. maybe that wasn't one of them, and maybe it was the fact that I haven't seen the All-22 yet. So I'm just
Yep.
going off of what I saw on the
We're
broadcast.
still waiting on that as we are this time of year, and that's very frustrating.
Right. But I did want to make sure it's still a third of Turk Wharton's snaps came at end. And I think that's a good development as well to
Yeah.
change that rotation up.
Yeah, and I think that they kind of have to. They need to get some kind of pressure at that position, and between Mike Dana and Frank Clark, and Okafor's really not getting the pressure that you'd hope that he would get. So that's going to be an issue in getting that pressure. Kando's not on the roster right now, and Damone Harris is a practice squad guy that actually I think is out of call-ups now. So I'm really not sure what they're going to do with that position if they can't bring him up.
Yeah, that's my question as well. And he's been in a couple of good spots. Did he get snaps yesterday?
Yeah, he got snaps.
He got 7.
Yeah.
I think he was a guy who's flashed at times, and maybe if they're not happy, maybe they do have to make some room there. The Kyle Long thing that we talked about in the first segment, it certainly does put a kibosh on that if they feel that he's ready and they want to get him into the mix right away. Depending on Trey Smith's ankle, I'm waiting patiently for an update on that. I didn't get anything from Andy Reid on it. He did play through the game, but sometimes, especially for offensive linemen, when you get that day of rest, you go in for treatment, all of a sudden everything tightens up.
Yep.
Everything becomes more problematic. So maybe no news is good news. We're going to have to wait and see, but it's the big guys, I think both trenches, that made that game become what it was. And without them, I don't think that they get things corrected. Without them, I don't think, and even Patrick talked about, I think it was halftime, right? That a couple of linemen, Orlando Brown in particular, he shouted out for coming over and kind of settling him down and giving him the basis to make that change. And I felt like for Patrick in particular, after that horrendous decision to throw the ball up that ended up getting turned over, it felt like after that halftime that he kind of settled down. I heard some rumors about him talking to the team and everything, whether it was him talking to them or them talking to him, whatever it was. That offensive line helped him, I think, in the second half. And I felt like that turned Patrick a little bit back towards what he has been. Am I again dreaming here?
I don't think you're dreaming. I think what is interesting about the way that played is Mahomes has looked like he's been pressing all season. And he finally just looked like he was himself in the second half, and he was more loose and able to just go out and play. And if he can go out and play, then you're going to see plays like the across the body throw to Tyreek Hill that didn't count.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't seen it already, go check out Seth's timeline. I think, or I'm not sure if Locked on Chiefs retweeted or not, but go check out Seth's timeline. Curtis Siebel actually has a picture of right as Patrick threw that ball that went to Tyreek Hill, where Tyreek Hill is not even on the screen yet, and Patrick's already thrown the ball. And it's 20 yards across the field just to where Hill is going to catch the ball, and it's a 30-yard throw. So Hill is extremely fast, which we already knew, but the insanity of that throw becomes even more evident when you see that specific view. And it's just phenomenal. And when he makes those types of plays, then you get to a point where this team is going to be unbeatable again because, and I say unbeatable, but I really do mean that, because when he is in that groove and he can go do those types of things, he has the ability to change the game in so many different aspects that other teams just aren't going to be able to defend.
Yeah. And to his credit, there was a lot of open space on that side of the ball. And so allowing himself to make that throw and let Tyreek do what he does, that is another aspect of Patrick maximizing the guys he's throwing to as well. And I think that pays off. There's little things that you need to let him do in order for him to maximize the offense. And that's what they have to be doing in life. We're all bound for different things. And with Beach Bound Vacations, you can be bound for adventure or passion or discovery or just simple togetherness. Bound for immersion or rejuvenation, which is what I just got back from. I had a great vacation as well. And you may be bound for encountering something unexpected. When I'm usually out on vacation, whether it's a beach resort or somewhere else, I have a tendency to end up at the poolside bar or, in a local restaurant trying something new that I haven't had before. And as long as you have got a good view and a good drink in your hand, you should be happy. I certainly am. With beachbound.com, you can find the perfect vacation for you, always at a beach, no matter what you're looking for. What are you bound for? Visit beachbound.com today. That's one way I think to spend a little money. If you need to save up for a beach vacation, you can do it over at rockauto.com because they have everything that you need. You can put it all in their cart and it will save you time and money. up to 100% off of what a chain store is going to do. And they might not even have stock because they're a brick and mortar store. This allows you to do everything online and pull from all their warehouses, no matter what maker corrected. Rock Auto is a family business. They've been doing it for 20 years. They're super reliable, and they're even great at keeping everything priced, no matter whether you're a professional or a do-it-yourselfer. They make things easy to find, from brake parts to tail lamps to oil, or even the carpet that you sometimes have to replace because things go wrong in the backseat. That does happen. All you got to do is go over to rockauto.com right now, put all the parts that you need in a cart, and then they ask you, how did you hear about us? If you would write in the Locked On in that box, that would help us out and let them know that we sent you over there. Don't miss it. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts that you're ever going to need. Check out rockauto.com. So the turnaround for Patrick, I think, was important, but I think the turnaround for the defense was important too. And a lot of hubbub about Tyrann Mathieu. Had an interesting altercation with a friend of ours online, local media, that got a little bit out of hand. And I think at the end of the day, I want to see fire from the leadership here. The question is, how does the team respond to it? If it works within that locker room and you get an increased performance, better communication, guys doing their job better, I think that kind of fire is not only important, but essential to get a good team going. If you don't have that respect in the locker room, you try that, it has a tendency to backfire. And I think clearly, judging by way, in particular the secondary, but the defense as a whole, respond in the second half, I feel like that is due to the frustration we saw from Tyrann Mathieu.
Yeah, and I do think Tyrann Mathieu has a big effect on this defense, and the way he plays and the way he leads has a huge effect on this defense. But, the thing that really sticks out to me, don't get me wrong, Tyrann Mathieu is a very important cog in this defense, but the defense coming together as a whole in the second half, allowing less than 100 yards of offense against it and not allowing a single point in the second half says a lot to me. You also look back, this defense has only allowed 20 points in the past 6 quarters, and 7 of those went to the Buffalo Bills, a team that has a fantastic offense. So I do think that the defense is starting to turn it around. I think Spagnuolo has started to find things that have started to work. And I do think that Juan Thornhill starting really helped as well.
Yeah, and it was very clear to me that Thornhill was the salve that they needed for this wound. We've been talking about it forever, so it wasn't a surprise. But the fact that he went from playing 25 to 44% of the snaps in the last couple of weeks to being out there for every single defensive snap, along with Lajarius Sneed and Rashad Fenton and Tyrann Mathieu, all of them played 100% of the snaps, and having those core guys able to do that. And Mike Hill was no slouch. He only missed 12 snaps. Mike Hughes, not Hill.
I was wondering what you were saying there.
Yeah. Little ahead of myself, but he only missed 12 of 60 snaps. So having those core guys out there, I think as a unit was able to not have to mix and match and change responsibilities, but keep everything a little bit more steady in terms of communication as well. I think it paid off.
Yeah, it definitely paid off, and I do think that what you're looking at going forward is you are looking at a defensive unit, especially in the backfield, that is going to get better and better as the season progresses. And I think really what this team was missing at times that they were able to do on Sunday was they were able to use Tyrann Mathieu in the roles that he really feels the best. Because you're not putting a guy like Daniel Sorensen, who's limited in speed in the back end of the defense a lot. Yes, he still ended up back there a few times, which I wasn't happy with, but it didn't seem to burn Kansas City very often. But using Sorensen in his better role and using Tyrann Mathieu where he is best is really what is going to help this Chiefs defense take another step forward. And that's also without having a lot of pressure on the front end, which I think you're going to get when Chris Jones comes back from injury. But I am glad they shut him down for a couple of games because that wrist is not going to get better unless he doesn't play. And if he can't hand fight the way he does, he's not going to be effective. We saw that the 3 weeks after the injury began.
Yeah. And from the snap counts, you can see that Juan was not at free safety the entire mathieu Tyrann did get, I think it was 17 snaps at free. So they certainly are playing some too high coverages. In fact, Mathieu said after the game that they feel that that's their best shell, is to have 2 safeties deep. And that's fine. I know it takes away from the robber mentality and the things that make Tyrann so good by not having him a little closer to the line of scrimmage. But having the 2 of them with underneath coverage, I think, is the way that this team has to play going forward. It's certainly turned that around. but that's not enough. They have more room to go. The thing that is perplexing to me here, and the thing that must change next week, and I'm not going to back off of this, Willie Gay got less than half the snaps and less than 45% of the snaps that Ben Niemann got. This is a problem in that they're just taking it too slow with Willie Gay.
I guess I will argue the fact that you don't rush him back from an injury if you don't think he's 100%. And maybe he shouldn't be playing at all if you don't think he's 100%. And I guess I could get that argument, but I think that they need him on the field. So to me, it makes more sense to ease him back into playing because he hasn't played in 3 weeks, and ease him in when in games where you probably don't need him near as much as you're going to need him over once you start getting into the second half of the schedule, and which starts with the Packers here in a couple of weeks. I could see a situation where he is going to be extremely needed against Derrick Henry, and I get that. But again, I wouldn't have expected him to step in and start just because I don't think he was 100% there. Turf toe is something that's going to be managed and could take surgery in a lot of cases. That's what ended up happening with Patrick, and it took him multiple weeks to get over.
That's true. I think they would have accomplished that if they needed to, though. So, like this week against the Titans, I expect to see Willie Gay Jr. and Colin Saunders at linebacker.
Colin Saunders at linebacker. Okay. Well, you go ahead and do that. I'm going to say no. Please, no. Colin Saunders, while he has the speed to maybe play linebacker against a team when they're trying to play their second unit and save their starters, I don't want to see him there on a regular basis. My question is Anthony Hitchens going to play? If he doesn't play, you need to have Nick Bolton start at middle linebacker, and you need him to start and get all the snaps there at practice this week. And if Hitchens doesn't come back for a couple of weeks, I'm not so sure you give him the job back because I think Bolton will take it over.
At that point, you may very well be correct. And in the nickel, you got to play he and Willie Gay together. You have to have the speed because I think Nick showed again some of the shortcomings he has. There's a lot of good with Nick Bolton, but covering to the sidelines is not one of them. You have to have someone on there that is better than Ben Niemann doing the same thing, and it's got to be Willie Gay.
Well, and the bigger problem is you have that huge play to Ricky Seals-Jones, which should have never happened. But it was the lack of eye discipline on the defender's part that got it, and Niemann just doesn't have the speed to catch up to him.
Yeah, you make a mistake, and that's over with that group. Yeah. And I'm only half kidding. Like, we'll get into it later in the week about how important it is to stop Derrick Henry. One of those things is to either run a bear front and cover up the A-gaps or put somebody like Saunders in there at times. So knowing that it's a run fit for him, maybe you can find a way to create a bubble where he can rush from a standing linebacker spot. I think they need to get creative, and I think that they need to not take things off the table right now. This game, I think, might be the most important that we've seen so far, this upcoming game against the Titans, to take advantage of the role that they got on against the Washington football team.
Yeah, and I think that could be. I do think that this defense is going to get going in the right direction. The question is does Chris Jones return this week? If he returns this week, that should help a little bit because it'll give you more depth on the defensive line, which should be able to keep your defensive line fresher. And Jones can play defensive end or defensive tackle, and I think he can be effective. The problem that you're going to run into is Jones going to play defensive end? Is he going to be effective shutting down his end? Really is what it comes down to. Is he going to crash down too much like we saw against Baltimore? Ryan Tannehill is not Lamar Jackson. I get that, but it's still a question of whether or not he can keep his gaps and he can keep, the runs in the side, because that's the big thing, especially with a guy like Derrick Henry. You don't want your corners taking a lot of those shots at trying to tackle him one-on-one.
Absolutely. We're going to get more into the coming Titans game, folks. Matt's going to be here tomorrow with me. We'll go over some of the takeaways as we get from him on the inside of this, and then we're going to turn the page towards those Titans. We have a crossover for you. We have our preview as always. A lot of stuff going on here. Thanks for checking out and being our first listen today. Make sure you check out Peacock and Williamson's as well. I think you guys will enjoy that and some unique perspective as well. Thanks for being here with us today, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.